Okay, today our project is going to be a simple dinner plate. It's turned out of a piece of wood that can be as thin as 3/4 of an inch. You simply take a flat piece of wood, you cut it round on a bandsaw. This one will be turned with a faceplate. That's the technique that this video is intended to show, is how to use a faceplate correctly. And we'll go through all of that, and we'll actually turn the completed plate, and we'll get started with that in just a moment. Okay, as you begin to turn a plate, the first thing you need, of course, is a blank. You need a piece of wood that you're going to turn the plate from. Now, I've already done a little bit of work on it. I've found the center, and I've scribed a circle that will define the outside diameter of the plate. Now, for this particular project, the technique that we want to learn is how to use a faceplate. Now, a faceplate is very simply a flat plate that has a way to attach it to the lathe through the threads that will actually screw onto the headstock. And it has a number of holes where you can screw the faceplate to your work. Now, they come in lots of different sizes. This one is very large. It's not one that you would use for a project this small. One like this would be a much better choice. Now, it's the same thing. It has the threads where you can screw it onto your headstock, and it has the holes where you can attach screws. Now, there's a lot of different faceplates on the market. I prefer one that has either 4 or 8 holes. There's a lot of them on the market that have 6 holes. Those I don't like because it makes it more difficult to actually center the faceplate on the work. What I like to do is when I draw my lines from the corners to establish my center, it gives me 2 intersecting lines at 90 degrees. So I have 4 points. Now I can take this faceplate and arrange it on here to where my lines actually go through the center line of 2 of the holes. Now, when I line up on 2 of these, it just lines me up in one axis. But if I align on these 2 and these 2, then I can position this faceplate to where it's actually very close to the center. And I can use the lines. Now, if this faceplate had 6 holes, I would not be able to do that. So the faceplates with 6 holes make it much more difficult to attach the faceplate to your work. Now, I've already marked the center point for all 8 of the screws. Now, when you're putting screws in a faceplate, it's incredibly important to know how much protrusion you're going to get on a piece this thin. This is about 1 inch thick. And if I put a screw with a lot of protrusion in it, and then I put 8 holes in the face of this, it's possible that they would be so deep that when I hollow out the inside of my bowl, or inside of my plate rather, I would not be able to take out the holes. So we want a hole that's short enough that we can take it out when we turn the inside of the plate, but yet has enough hold so the piece is not going to come off. So that's where 8 holes come in really handy. I can put 8 screws with short protrusions, and I will get enough holding power to ensure that the piece is going to stay on my faceplate. Now, like anything else in woodworking, it's not wise to take a screw and just screw it into wood. A lot of times you have to put enough force on it to where you can actually shear off the head of the screw. And that causes you all kinds of problems. So I never put a screw in wood without a pilot hole. Now I've already got my centers marked, and if I'm not careful, I'll make the same mistake with the drill that I could make with the screw. I could drill that too deep, and then I've got a hole that I can't take out when I hollow out the inside of the plate. So I've just taken masking tape and I have put it on the drill, so it's a makeshift depth gauge. So I just go down to the tape and stop. So it's a real simple thing to drill these holes. Now, to ensure that I'm going to be able to get the drill bit exactly where I want it, I'll need to mark the holes with a center punch. Now, I could do that in several different ways. I can use an awl and just simply find the center and mark it. Or I can take the spring-loaded center punch and I can use that device as well. So it's just a matter of personal preference. This one is a little bit faster, and I just go around and I mark all 8 holes. And then I'm ready to actually drill my pilot holes. Now I want to make sure that I don't go deeper than the tape. Now, I can reposition the faceplate back on the work, and we can get the first couple of screws started. Now, I'm not going to put that all the way down. It's still loose. So I want to leave it that way until I get a couple of these started. And it wouldn't be a bad idea to go ahead and get all 8 of them actually started in the holes before we tighten any of them up. Now, the downside of putting 8 screws in a piece, of course, is you have to actually tighten up all 8 of them. Now, there's a couple of things that you could do that would make this a little bit faster. You could use a drill motor. You could have somebody else do it. That's always a good idea. But eventually, you'll get all of the screws tightened up. and you have your faceplate firmly attached to your work. Now the next step is going to be to cut this out on a bandsaw and get the piece already close to round. And again, I'm not trying to make it round on the bandsaw. I'm just trying to cut away the excess. So I will go ahead and get that done, and then we'll put this on the lathe. You've already seen how to use the bandsaw to cut that, so we don't need to go into that. And in the next segment, we'll put this on the lathe and we can actually start turning it. Okay, now we have our blank cut round on the bandsaw. We have our faceplate mounted, and it's just a simple matter of screwing the faceplate onto the headstock, and we're ready to actually turn it. Now the first step would be to turn it round. And we'll accomplish that real quickly. Now, I'm using the bowl gouge, and as you can see, I'm riding the bevel. I have my screw at about a 45-degree angle. And we'll just check to make sure that we have all of the flat spots off, and not quite. Okay, we now have our plate blank round. Now the next step is going to be to cut the recess in the bottom, because we're going to turn the entire back of the plate from this position. But we need a way to flip it over so we can hollow out the inside of the plate. So we'll need a recess in the bottom so we can do that. Now I'm going to change the camera position so you can see that better, and we'll be right back in the next segment. Okay, now we have a better angle, and we're going to go ahead and set up, and we're going to locate and turn the recess that we'll use to turn the inside. Now the first step is to actually find the center. So there's the center of our piece. And now, as far as the size of the recess goes, it's going to depend on the chuck that you're going to use. Now this is a chuck I'll be using. I need to measure the outside diameter, because that's going to have to go inside my recess and expand. And that's just slightly under 2 inches, so I'll cut this at 2 inches or slightly over, no more than 2 1/8. We don't want to get the recess too large. So we'll just measure from our center line, and we'll come out just slightly over an inch. Scribe our circle, and that's the size of the recess that I want. Now we'll cut that recess with the parting tool. We're going to go about 3/6 inches deep. Because we're dealing with a plate, we don't have a lot of excess depth that we can work with. So we're going to minimize the depth on our recess. And that should give us about a 3/16 of an inch recess. And again, because the chuck jaws on my chuck have a slight dovetail on it, I need to cut a dovetail in here so I'll get a good fit to my jaws. And now that's going to complete the recess. And if you want to be sure, you could take the chuck and actually place it in here and see that it'll fit. The next step here is going to be to actually form the bottom of our plate. Now, to do that, we need to decide on the shape that we're going to have. I want this side of my plate to actually be the rim. And since that rim is going to be fairly small, this is pretty much going to angle all the way over to about 1/4 of an inch from this side of the plate. Now, there's another consideration that we have to take in and decide how we're going to deal with it. And that's, how are we going to ensure that our plate is stable when we put it down on a table? The best way to do that is to have a larger area out here that is close to flat. Now, our bowl currently is about 10.5 inches in diameter. Now, we're going to extend our center line out to about here. Now, that's just an arbitrary size. But what I want to make sure is that inside this line is a little bit lower undercut. And on the outside, of course, it's undercut to form the bottom of our plate. By doing this, we'll ensure that this diameter right here is the point of contact when I put it down on a tabletop. And I want that to be the only part that actually hits the tabletop. So I need to reduce the material on either side of it to ensure that that's the part that's going to actually hit the table. Now, we'll do that real simply with a bowl gouge. We will work the inside first. Now, this doesn't have to be much. Now, I only took off a fairly small amount, but that's going to ensure that none of this inside area touches the tabletop. Now, by doing that, I've reduced the depth of my recess, so I'm going to have to go back and adjust that just a little bit. Now then, we're ready to actually turn this outside. And what I want to do is set my tool rest to the angle that I want this to be cut. If I do that, then I can use my index finger on the tool rest to keep this area, to keep that line fairly straight. Now, again, we'll use the bowl gouge on that, and we can start with a pull cut. Then we're just really removing material. You can do this very simply. Now we're getting fairly close. We're still a little bit thick right here. And we can stop and make sure that we've got pretty close to a straight line. Now that's not absolutely necessary. You can put any kind of shape that you want. If you have a different idea for how you would like your bowl to be shaped, then by all means go ahead and use that shape. Just be careful. Everything that you do on the bottom is going to have an effect on what you're able to turn on the inside. If you undercut this a lot, you're not going to be able to flatten the bottom of this plate very well. So I tend to stay with pretty much a straight line. I don't want to go inside this line because that's my that's going to be the portion that sits on the floor, and I want that to be perfectly flat. Now, I've got a little bit more work to do here, so we'll go ahead and get that done. Now I need to clean that up a little bit, and we'll be ready to do our final work on the bottom. Okay, now we have a much smoother surface on the bottom. We've still maintained our section right here. So I'm going to stop right here and I'm going to sand the bottom of this. And sanding is not anything that you need to watch. There's no secrets to it. You just have to get it nice and smooth and get your contour that you want. And then as soon as that's finished, we'll come back and we'll flip it over and we'll start turning the inside. Okay, now we've got our bottom completely sanded and we want to do everything to the bottom that we're going to do. Once we turn this around, you will not be able to come back and work on the bottom of this at all. So it's to your advantage to go ahead and get this completely finished. So there's nothing else to do on the bottom. Now, to reverse this around and put it on a chuck, we're going to first need to take our faceplate off. Okay, now we've taken our faceplate off and we're ready to attach our plate to the chuck. Now this is the chuck we'll be using and it's just a simple matter of expanding the jaws. Now there's a fine line between having enough pressure to hold the plate on and not enough pressure to where the first time you put a tool on it, it'll pull the plate off the chuck. And you also have to consider that if you put too much pressure, you can actually split out the recess that you've cut in the back. So we're on and it's going to stay. The trick now is to hollow out the inside of our plate. We want to maintain pretty much the same wall thickness through here. We want a good sized portion of the bottom of the plate to be flat. You can choose to put a lip on your plate if you prefer to do that. Now I kind of like to put a lip on the plates that I turn, so I'm going to do that on this one. But the actual rim treatment that you use is entirely up to you. A lot of people like to come all the way out and then round over the edge. Me, I prefer to put a lip. Now most of the work will be done with a bowl gouge. Depth is critical. You do not have that much room. You can't just keep going. You'll run into your recess. So you want to take it slowly. Another thing you have to consider is you have a fair-sized diameter. You can't just take out all of the material and work your way down as a whole. You have to go in increments. You have to use an incremental approach, and then you'll turn the outside inch or so first. And then once you have that completely shaped and finished to suit, then you don't come back. You move on toward the center, but you can't go back and put a tool on that piece again. Before we finish turning this, most likely this piece will go out around. The only constant in the universe is wood moves. And this piece will most likely move a little bit at the rim as I begin to turn it thinner. So once it gets out of round, that adds to the problem of going back out. So you really need to do this in increments and leave as much material as possible to add support to this edge while you're turning. So it's going to look something like this. Now, I have my wing defined. I know where it's going to be. Now I need to work on this edge out here. I need to get this rolled over and finished. I'm not going to be able to come back and do this later. Now, I've pretty much got this first section set. All I need to do on any of this is to sand it, and we can do that all at once at the end. So I've got my lip located. I've got a little bit more that I can go down in here to start that second increment. But I've got to be really careful here because I'm not going to be able to go all the way down. I've got to establish the angle with just that inch and then be able to continue it. So it's very important that I get that angle correct in this first increment. Then continuing it through the subsequent increments would be much easier. So that's your next trick, is to just get this second inch shaped. Okay, that's not too bad. I'm beginning to get my angle. I'm going to do a little bit more right in here, take a little bit more, then I'll start on that third inch. Okay, that's pretty close. So now I'm going to start on that third inch. Now that's pretty close to what I want. I've got a good angle in here that matches my angle on the outside. And now the remainder of this is going to be flat. I'm not going to be going any deeper than I am right here. All of this material will simply be taken off in a straight line. I want this plate to be flat on the bottom. I want to take out enough material to get rid of my screw holes, and then I'll be in good shape. Now, we've got the bottom pretty much flat. We've got our sides the way we want them. So we're pretty much ready to just do the finish sanding. And I'm going to show you again how I used the drill motor and the foam disc on the bottom. And then we'll have this finished in just a few minutes. Now, we've seen this before. It's just a foam pad in a drill motor with hook and loop adhesive on the sandpaper. Now, we want the bottom of this bowl very flat, and we've talked about this before. It's difficult to get the bottom flat because of the speed differential between the different sections of the bowl and the lineal speed that it rotates. So with this, we can guarantee that we can get the bottom of this bowl flat. We just turn that speed down to about 800. So now we've pretty much got the bottom flat. The rest of it is just a matter of sanding. Now I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then we'll be back in just a minute. Okay, I've finished sanding the plate, and I'm happy with the shape. I'm happy with the sanding on it. So it's now ready to take off the chuck. So we have our plate that's completely turned. It's now ready to finish, and you've got lots of options on how you finish it. You could use a lacquer, a spray lacquer. You could use the wipe-on poly. You could even just put butcher block on it. You have a lot of options for how you're going to finish it. And there you have it. I hope you enjoyed watching. I certainly enjoyed making it. And we'll see you next time.